I have been asked to speak about the French experience. That was quite a challenge because I know what I'm doing in my center, but I was not aware of what is ongoing in France, and I was forced to do a snapshot study. But we did it 10 years ago, and it was quite interesting at the end. And the second part of my talk, I have been asked to speak about GLUT1 deficiencies, and I will say a word on it. Then the first part is about the French perspective, and I will go through the fact that we had changes, a lot of changes in the use of ketogenic diet in the last 15 years. I will come back to some study we've done a few years ago with 2 surveys, one that has been done in 2005, and the idea at that time was the fact that a formula start to be available in France and to see if there is any change in the prescription of the ketogenic diet because of the availability of the formula. And the idea in 2008 to replicate that study was because the randomized trial went out and some international guideline went out. Then I did the snapshot for today, then something interesting probably, and the end of the talk will be on GLUT1. Then you are all aware that the ketogenic diet has a very long history, starting with a prehistory with Hippocrates, and some mention in Gospel about the fasting. I don't know about the praying part, but anyway, it's also mentioned. And then everybody already spoke about the John Hopkins experience, and then the involvement of John Friedman to do the first multi-center study, and then the development of the diet, and definitively the involvement of the Charlie Foundation and Matthew Strundt as a support. And it's not only a physician or a dietary history, it's also family support that help to bring the diet and to move forward and where we are today. Then in the last 15 years, I thought that there is 2 main points that help to change our way to practice. First was the 2 studies, one retrospective study and one prospective study that tried to assess if the use of a fasting period at the initiation of the diet changed something in the result, in the outcome at 3 months of the diet in refractory epilepsy patients. This is a retrospective study that is a Korean study. Basically, they look at patients, what were the responder rate if they use the fasting period of 24 hours at the initiation of the diet, compared to patients that were not fast at the initiation of the diet, and they look at the responder after 3 months of ketogenic diet, and it was not different. A second study has been done, and it was a prospective study with 24 patients in each group. And you can see after 3 months in both groups, the group that had a fasting period at the initiation of the ketogenic diet and the group that did not have any fasting, the result was quite similar with the same rate of seizure-free patients at 3 months of the diet and the same percentage of responder. Then, of course, it was a very high impact because it was a huge cause of side effect at initiation with hypoglycemia, in particular in very young kids. It was a tricky period to start the diet, and it was very challenging at that time. The second kind of recent historical point is something that looks strange today because it's so obvious and probably for everyone here that the diet is working. But back 15 years ago, when you went to epilepsy meeting, when we were speaking about ketogenic diet, our adult colleague from, I'm an epileptologist, okay. Then our adult colleague from epileptologists used to say, oh, your diet, your placebo effect with your kids, you know, and there are, at that time, there are a lot of skepticism. Then even when the first study, the multi-center study has been done in the idea that it was not a center effect, because one of the major criticism at that time was the fact that, you know, the way you cook the diet, you manage the patient, you manage the family, there is a huge placebo effect, and that's the reason it's an effect center, and you claim good results because your center, the way you manage the family, you take care of the kid, you call regularly, improve basically the well-being of the whole family, and then change the seizure rate. And that's the reason the first multi-center study has been done, coordinated by John Friedman at that time, and just to show that it was not a center effect. But even after that trial, skepticism remained, and that's the reason the randomized control trial has been done in children, 2 to 16 years, after 4 weeks of baseline to count the seizures. The patients were assigned for ketogenic diet directly after the 4 weeks of baseline, or wait 3 months to start the ketogenic diet. And then the 3 months period serve as a control for the ketogenic diet, and it establishes the efficacy of the diet. A second randomized control trial is now available for the modified Atkins diet, saying that the modified Atkins diet with the same methods is effective better than doing nothing, but you can't say anything about what is the difference on efficacy between the modified Atkins diet and the ketogenic diet for now. And I think there is no reason to compare and to do a trial to compare both of them. Then coming to France now, we did 2 surveys with the same question in 2005 and 2008. The idea in 2005 was to compare a first period, 2001-2002, and 2002-2003, because the availability of the formula was 2002 in France for the first ketogenic diet formula. And then in 2005, the idea was to look more carefully in the change of the practice, because first, what I mentioned, maybe the 2 studies about the initiation with fasting or no fasting might change the practice in France. And the second, maybe because the decrease of skepticism with the randomized trial might increase the number of prescription. Then you are not aware about that study, and because it was published in French. And it's a small study anyway. Then in 2005, we sent to 27 university, hospital, pediatric neurology department or division. We got 67% response, and 16 of the 18 responders mentioned that they were using the ketogenic diet. In 2008, we did better. Maybe I was more pushy, probably. We got 22 response, 81% responder, and 20 of 22 of the responder were conducting the ketogenic diet. Then this is in French, but I will explain you. Then we ask for each center for the 3 period, 2001-2002, 2003-2004, and 2005 to 2008, how many ketogenic diets they initiate each year for epilepsy or for other reason, mostly metabolic disorder, of course. And you can see that this is the number of patients, 0 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 12, more than 12 each year. And you can see that from 2001 to 2008, the number of small prescribers, 0 to 3 each year, decreased, and it was significant, and the number of 4 to 7 increased. That it's a change, but it's not a lot when you think about it. Then looking more carefully in the practice, when we did the survey in 2005, asking of what was done 2001 to 2004, when we asked the different centers if their protocol used an initial fasting period to start the diet, 10 of the 16 say yes, while in 2008, only 1 center continued to start the diet with a fasting period. We asked about caloric restriction, and strangely, both in 2005 and 2008, 4 centers of 15 and 4 centers of 20 respond that they restrict the calorie intake inside the ketogenic diet. And when we ask, do you sometimes prescribe modified Atkins diet, was 0 in 2005 and was 1 in 2008. It's our center, basically. Sorry. Then, because of this meeting, I decided to do a snapshot. Then I called my email 10 years later, 10 questions. And then I sent to 29 centers only pediatric neurology department for the French university hospital. And I was as pushy as in 2008. Then I got 25 response from the 29 center, 86% of responder. Then 100% of the center are ketogenic diet user, and none of them use a fasting period. When I ask them, do you think that you increase your number of prescription yearly since 2008? 88% mentioned that they increase the number of prescription each year. I ask, do you initiate modified Atkins diet? And to consider that they are used to do it, I would like to have kind of feedback of centers that are regularly users, and I mentioned, are you initiating at least 5 modified Atkins per year? And you can see that there is definitively a change, because now we have 1/3 of the center that are using also modified Atkins diet, initiating at least 5 modified Atkins diet. Then looking back to the literature, I was thinking what kind of question I can put there to see if they change their practice over time. For example, in 2005 and 2008, the fasting was a good example. And then I decided to ask, what is the youngest age you consider to initiate the diet? Because Anastasia, oh, she left, mentioned this morning about the infant and the infantile guideline. Then I asked them, and then the mean age, youngest age to consider to start the diet was 4 months. Then that's pretty young, actually, and showing that probably the French center are now kind of more confident to use in infant. Then coming now to the number of ketogenic diet initiate each year, you can see that half of the responder basically initiate less than 10 ketogenic diet a year, was 7 center initiate between 1 to 5 ketogenic diet a year, 7 center 5 to 10. And interestingly, that number was not present in the past survey. 10 to 15, it's 4 center for 15 to 20, and 3 center initiate more than 20 ketogenic diet a year. Even if the number of initiation of ketogenic diet seems to have increased, of course it's based on the answer of the physician. I'm not in the center to control, of course. Even if the proportion of ketogenic diet, the number of ketogenic diet increased in the last 10 years, the next question was, do you think that it will continue to increase or not? That was kind of an interesting question. And when I asked that, basically, most of them, I think it's 65%, respond, yes, we think that we will continue to increase the use of the ketogenic diet. Then the last 2 questions was, I asked with several sentences to score first, what are the barriers to use the ketogenic diet? And the last question was how you can be helped, or you think that's something that could help to promote the initiation of ketogenic diet for your patients. Then I ask with this 8 proposal to score from 1 to 8. 1 is the more important, meaning that the lower score, it's the most important for the group, okay? Then the sentence was, do you think that the barrier is the difficulty for the child to accept the diet and keep on diet? The difficulty to provide the diet or maintain the diet in school or in daily occupational centers. Then the difficulty for the family to conduct the diet. The need to have more teaching for the dietary staff. Have more dietary nurses, meaning more time available to promote ketogenic diet inside your department. Need to train your staff, meaning not the nurse, not only the physician, but the whole department staff need to have some support to better help. Need more guideline and need more medical education. You know, that one is definitively biased. If you ask a physician if he's needing more training, no way he say yes, I guess. But anyway. But I'm also biased. Anyway. Then looking at what is the most important barrier, basically, is how for the family to conduct. And then the second one was the training of the staff, meaning not only the couple, dietitian, and physician, but the whole environment to conduct the diet inside the hospital. Of course, the fact that it is difficult for the child to accept or maintain, and at school and in the daily occupational center was also present. I was surprised that the time for dedicated nurses was not lower score, meaning more important for the physician, but that was the result. Then the next question was how to help to promote the ketogenic diet. Then individual mentoring for families, individual mentoring for the ketogenic diet team, more ketogenic diet product, more dedicated time of the dietary nurses for keto patients, cookbooks, new international guideline, new national guideline. Then this is the French things. French people think that national is more important than international. No surprise. You know, it's a quality control question. And then I was not surprised, but it was interesting to see that for the physician, cookbook and more ketogenic diet products are scored more important than other. And then the mentoring of the family went afterward and more important than kind of individual mentoring of a keto team. But maybe there is a bias here also because we ask only university center, and there are probably big community hospitals that are also starting ketogenic diet in France. This is my Snapchat study for today. Then I'm not saying only what we are doing. And then the second part of the talk, it's about the GLUT1 deficiency and the management. Basically, general rule, I have no particular advice. There is new things, but I will definitively just draw a general picture about GLUT1 deficiency. Then you know that in physiological condition, this is a drawing of the blood-brain barrier. Everything that is in your blood, it's tightly regulated. Otherwise, everything dirty in your blood will go to your brain. Then there is regulation of almost everything. And as well for the glucose and the ketone body, and there are transporters for that. Then there is a glucose transporter, and this transporter on the blood-brain barrier is the GLUT1 transporter. And there are also the ketone bodies going through another transporter. And there is some gene mutation of the gene who code for that protein, that is the GLUT1 transporter. In that case, it results in a change in the ability of the glucose to go through the blood-brain barrier. And basically, glucose is one of the main energetic substrate for your brain, meaning that your brain is functioning in a kind of a lack of energy. Then the only way, in that case, of course, the patient develops different type of neurological symptoms. I will go through it. The only way to provide an alternative substrate, energetic substrate to the brain, is to use a transporter that is working, meaning the ketone body transporter. Then for the GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, then the initial clinical picture that was described by Dr. De Vivo mentioned the more severe patients that was described as patients with very severe brain disorder that we used to call encephalopathy. We are still speaking about encephalopathy, but that means that it's just a very severe brain disease. In that patient, usually starting as an infant, multi-type of seizures that are refractory, then a microcephalia appear and different type of neurological symptoms. Movement disorder can develop pyramidal symptoms, and it remains like that. Of course, that was the more severe phenotype. We know now that there are other kind of symptoms. Then the earlier is the first symptoms, and the more chance, or no chance, but the more likely you will observe seizures, while in other patients with milder phenotypes that might start the first symptoms during late childhood or in adolescence, you have more chance to observe movement disorder than seizures, but could be both, of course, because the spectrum is very wide. Then among the epilepsy patients, we were aware, inside the pediatric neurology field, we were well aware about the historical description of Dr. De Vivo, but recently a huge change happened, and one of the first one was this report of 5 patients that had absence seizures, typical absence seizures, before the age of 3-4 years old. It was not a real childhood absence epilepsy with early onset, because when you look at the type of seizures, the patient had myoclonic seizure or generalized tonic-clonic seizures. That is not the pure phenotype of a childhood absence epilepsy, because in childhood absence epilepsy, from the start, maybe later when they are adolescents, it's a different story, but at the start, you have only one type of seizures, it's typical absence seizures. If you have any other type of seizures, it's not anymore a childhood absence epilepsy. Then this was not a pure childhood absence epilepsy with early onset, because usually the start it's around 6-7 years old. But it was some epilepsy, including typical absence seizures. And when they look at the etiology, they found gene mutation for the GLUT1, and it was GLUT1 deficiency. It was one of the start to the description of many different types of syndromes that could be due to a GLUT1 deficiency. And many reports after the first report went out suggesting that among the patients with early onset phenotype of childhood absence epilepsy, not only early absence seizures, are probably patients with GLUT1 deficiency. And in that case, they are not always refractory, but the ketogenic diet is not an option, it's a treatment. And you need that kind of treatment because otherwise the brain continues to be exposed to the lack of energy, and you have a high risk to have other neurological symptoms, including intellectual disability. Then when we look at the different type of epilepsy phenotypes that could be observed in the GLUT1 deficiency, we already mentioned any epilepsy with typical absence seizures before the age of 4, probably 10% of them are GLUT1 deficiency. There is one Italian study looking at epilepsy with myoclonotonic seizures that we used to call DOS syndrome. They are probably, then in that Italian study, they found 5% of the patients. And there are also other reports of patients with myoclonic absence or even any patient with myoclonic seizures that is not inside a well-defined syndrome with a typical evolution. I think you should look at GLUT1 deficiency. It's not difficult to diagnose. You need a lumbar puncture. Of course, you need also the gene analysis, but your aim is not to provide just a treatment of the seizures, it's to prevent all the other neurological symptoms that could be observed. Then any epilepsy with an increase of the symptoms, in particular during fasting or after exercise, you should think about GLUT1 deficiency. Any epilepsy associated with movement disorders that is not fulfilling a clear syndrome or a clear etiology, you should think about GLUT1 deficiency. Patients with dyspraxia, dysarthria, with epilepsy, you should also think about it. In the late childhood or during adolescence, even in adulthood, in patients with movement disorder, then the movement disorder phenotype are also pretty wild. It could be dystonia or chorea, could be dyskinesia. There is mostly in adolescent, but could be seen earlier, patients with paroxysmal exercise-induced dyskinesia. Some phenotype of alternating hemiplegia has been reported, and there are patients inside the phenotype or as a sole symptoms, you can observe paroxysmal hemiplegia. Then for GLUT1 deficiency, the ketogenic diet is not an option, it's a treatment to prevent all the other neurological symptoms, including the intellectual disability risk. There are few studies reporting the use of the modified Atkins diet. There are about 30 patients reported in the literature. Most of them are case reported. There are two small studies. One is a study that we conduct in our center with 10 patients. And it's difficult to have a clear comparison of what is done and what are the efficacy in the modified Atkins diet because the report is only 30 patients to the huge experience with the ketogenic diet in the case of the patient with GLUT1 deficiency. For what is reported for the 30 patients on modified Atkins diet, most of them are seizure-free, similar to what is observed with the ketogenic diet. It's also effective in movement disorder. That is also the case in the ketogenic diet. The big gap in almost all of this study is the factor that is difficult to measure, is the delay of treatment factor. Meaning that if you start the treatment after 10 years of seizures, 10 years of lack of energy, of course you are treating the metabolic disorder, but the change in the brain, the way the network changed over time, maybe the way that the brain dysfunction is fixed forever because it has been so long time with a lack of energy, it's probably problematic, and it's not the diet is not working, it's probably too late start of treatments. Then we have a major gap in most of this study is the time to diagnosis that is not really measured, and it's difficult because we don't know yet how it impacts the efficacy of the treatment. Then when you are treating a patient, even if there is no efficacy, you should remind that maybe the time to diagnosis is also a factor. Then even if the ketogenic diet is definitively the gold standard, what the family are doing. And there is two interesting studies. One is a survey that has been conducted by the GLUT1 Deficiency Foundation in the US. And when they ask the participants to one of their conference, they report the use of ketogenic diet in 57 patients, modified Atkins diet in 29 patients, MCT ketogenic diet in 4, and low glycemic index treatment in 2 of them. And you can see that within the ketogenic diet, the ratio, for most of them it was a 4:1, but for many ratios were used there. Another survey has been done. It's quite, I think it's a little bit difficult to have a clear conclusion because it has been asked to the child neurologists what their patients were doing and not to the patient directly. Then there is kind of an indirect way to do that. Probably is also interesting because it's pointing out that the modified Atkins diet is used to a significant number of patients and strangely a very high level compared to the classical ketogenic diet. But the way to do the study was a bit strange. What is interesting here is they compare the level of beta-hydroxybutyrate that was assessed during the clinic at the same time. And something strange, it's reported like that, but you can see that in the modified Atkins diet, the level of the beta-hydroxybutyrate was higher than in the ketogenic diet. It's kind of a bit strange, but the message here is even if the gold standard of the treatment for the GLUT1 deficiency remain for now the ketogenic diet, and there is a clear use of the modified Atkins diet and start of some reports. Then looking at the phenotype, and over time, we know that the brain energy requirement is changing, meaning that even inside the GLUT1 deficiency population patients, the ketone body requirement may change over time, but we don't know yet exactly at what time, at what step, and what is ongoing. But we have to better understand what is ongoing, because maintain a 4:1 for lifelong, it's probably difficult, maybe impossible. Meaning that we have to understand at which point we can switch to other type of diet that will fulfill the requirement of the brain energy that is needed, and meaning that the ketone body will be enough with other type of diet. And thank you.